Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. We're back once again for another library treasure hunt. This is my library project to go browse the shelves and seek out some books that I have not seen or heard of before and potentially locate some hidden gems. So I did get a little behind on the actual reading of the books, though I did select them monthly as planned. So we're up to my November selection, and that is The Great Wave, The Era of Radical Disruption and the Rise of the Outsider by Michiko Kakutani. And this is a slim little nonfiction work. I'm not sure where I would put this, maybe social science. I think this falls in the same vein as Naomi Klein's Doppelganger, because it is giving us kind of social history and cultural history at an absolute breakneck speed. We're jumping through topics wildly. And this is taking the whole premise of the idea of a great wave. So what I had kind of expected and what I actually got out of this were not quite aligned, but I still felt there was a depth of information here despite the shortness of this book and 50 pages of notes and references. So that should tell you there is a lot to digest here. So we're flitting through lots of different inciting moments that are the start of a wave, and then talking through what's going on now, as well as history and how similar waves have occurred, the patterns that they followed. And also pulling together lots of seemingly disparate impacts of whatever the inciting moment was. So I picked one that is kind of the most coherent and least flitting through multiple topics for you, just so it would make a lot of sense when I read this. Meanwhile, America continued on a more or less progressive trajectory, with several decades that witnessed belated but crucial gains in social equity for African Americans, women, and LGBTQ+ people, and in 2008, the election of Barack Obama. It's precisely because conservatives are losing the long-term argument, the journalist Paul Waldman wrote in 2022, that they can squeeze out wins in the short term. It's the sense of being an outnumbered and oppressed minority that drives conservative anger, which can be mobilized into political action and translated to victory at the polls. Whenever America takes a step closer to the ideals of liberty and equality promised in the Constitution by embracing the rights of the formerly disenfranchised, there has been a backlash, often in the form of nativist bigotry and violence. For instance, the Ku Klux Klan was founded in 1865 by a group of Confederate veterans and became a terrorist vehicle for Southerners opposed to Reconstruction policies meant to provide newly freed African Americans with equal political rights. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the ebb and flow of KKK activity tends to follow a pattern. The Klan is strong when its leaders are able to capitalize on social tensions and fears of white people. In the decades after the Civil War, the Klan lynched and killed thousands. Members rampaged through black neighborhoods with guns and whips, set schools and churches on fire, and burned crosses on lawns. The group surged in influence again after World War I, as a wave of non-English speaking immigrants arrived in America, and as more and more women entered the workforce. Women considered impure for failing to go to church, say, or getting a divorce or riding in cars with men, were whipped, and doctors who performed abortions were tarred and feathered. By 1925, the scholar Joshua D. Rothman writes, the KKK had an estimated 2 million to 5 million members, and in the sympathy of millions more. The group sponsored parades and picnics, baseball teams, and beautiful baby contests, and Americans elected countless Klan members as mayors, school board and city council members, sheriffs, and state legislatures. While support for the Klan dwindled during the 1930s and 1940s, the group experienced another comeback in the wake of the 1954 Supreme Court ruling in Brown v. Board of Education, which found that racial segregation in public schools violated the 14th Amendment. In the ensuing decade, the KKK and its sympathizers murdered civil rights workers and freedom riders and bombed black churches. The building of Confederate monuments followed a similar pattern. Contrary to right-wing assertions, most of them were not constructed during the Civil War or in the immediate years afterward. Rather, most were built in two successive waves, during the era of Reconstruction reforms and during the 1950s and 60s as the civil rights movement gained traction. The monuments were not benign commemorations of history, but efforts to undermine voting rights and intimidate African Americans. So it then completely shifts gears to another topic entirely, but I think that what that's doing there is establishing Obama's election as the inciting point of the wave. And then it's moving through these patterns and trends that have repeated themselves over time. And when you look at that, it's not offering an answer or what the outcome is projected to be, but it's extrapolating, here are the patterns. And when we look back, it is kind of hopeful, though this is not necessarily providing directly the hope, that now we're almost 20 years on from Obama's election. maybe we have been seeing that trend all along, that upward, and we're just at the peak of the wave. We're at the crest, and perhaps we will be seeing it fall soon. So there are many moments of that kind of thing, and they're not all negative. Many of them are really positive. I think that this is looking at especially COVID as a big inciting factor for massive change in the world. Socioculturally, COVID was a massive turning point in many aspects of our lives, but a very mundane one that you don't really think about, or that I hadn't put two and two together on previously, is the globalization of our media sources. And just the ways that with production shut down, especially streaming media was turning internationally to content. And even personally, looking back 10 years or so, I certainly knew people who watched foreign language film and TV, lots of anime, definitely. I have lots of anime watching friends, but it was not as prominent as it is today. And the normalization of that now I see as something jarring now that I have perspective on it, where I think just the average person that I interact with, for the most part, has in some way seen or knows about foreign language things that are very popular and are commonplace now that we all are seeing on our streaming services. So I think that's true, but also since we're in the bookish space, books are brought up here, both from the globalization aspect. We certainly are seeing a rise in the popularity and interest in translated work, but also in the rise of book bans. That comes up prominently here, and how outsider groups being increasingly in demand, the rise in representation has been an inciting beginning of a wave in backlash against that. So that kind of going back to a negative wave, we have seen book bans increasing. We've seen people who want to erase representation that has become more prominent. And so I think it's interesting that this is tackling that topic and laying it out so clearly in something that we have hundreds of discussions about here on BookTube a year. And we still don't have necessarily a fix, but this provides a lot of insight for the past and how that has played out in previous occurrences. And that probably we are just going through another repeat of that and clawing forward progress from that every time we get a little bit farther forward. So I don't know that I have a necessary outcome of this, other than I'm overwhelmingly positive about the information in it and the way it was presented, though, as I mentioned up front, it is at breakneck speed. So this is crammed in, full of information. I think if you are someone who can take that, you have the palate for that type of nonfiction, where it's an onslaught of information, you'll really enjoy it. And there are so many places to go from this in terms of references that you can follow to other books that I literally just took pictures of a bunch of the references to carry on with me so that I can continue reading down these topics, because this was just a wealth of starter information to lead me down rabbit trails. I think that the author is really deft in getting across the points and being hopeful without promising anything unrealistic or optimistic even, just simply showing us, laying out, we've been through this, and it probably is following these historic patterns and trends that we can look to the past to see our way forward. So I found this a really powerful book, and for me, this was a hidden gem, and I do recommend at least you give it a try. So that is it for my library treasure hunt this month, and thank you so very much for watching.